All right, today we're jumping right into one of the most intense, most demanding passages in the entire Gospel of Matthew. We're in chapter 10, where Jesus lays out the terms of discipleship. And let me tell you, it's not some gentle invitation. No, it's a radical call to completely reorder your entire life. So let's break down what this really costs. So the whole passage really pivots on this one command right here in verse 28. Right off the bat, Jesus challenges his followers to completely redefine what fear even is. He's not telling them to be fearless, he's telling them to fear correctly. It forces this question: what's the real difference between temporary harm to your body and the ultimate final destruction of your very soul? So, this first part is all about a total reset of a disciple's inner world. Before Jesus even gets to any of the external actions, he goes straight for the most primal human emotion we have: fear. He's basically saying, look, your very first step is to get your priorities straight about what is truly dangerous. And Jesus draws such a stark line here. He says, look, the absolute worst that human beings can do to you is temporary. It's physical. They can kill the body, sure, but their authority just stops there. God's power, on the other hand, is ultimate. It governs everything: the physical, the spiritual, the temporary, and the eternal. So the key here, the real insight, is getting your perspective straight on what a real, lasting threat actually is. Now, to kind of soften this really intense command, Jesus uses a simple, everyday example. He asks, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing?" You have to understand, a farthing was a tiny Roman copper coin. It was the least valuable piece of money you could have back then. Sparrows were literally the food of the poorest of the poor. They were worth next to nothing in the marketplace. And this just illustrates his point so brilliantly. I mean, if God is aware of what happens to a creature that's worth practically nothing, how much more does he care about his followers? He says not a single one of those sparrows falls to the ground without your Father knowing. And then he hits them with this profound assurance: the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Wow, what a powerful metaphor for God's intimate, personal, and incredibly detailed knowledge of every single one of us. You, he says, are worth so much more than a whole flock of sparrows. So once you've got this new perspective on fear and value, it leads you to a critical choice. Armed with this incredible assurance, a disciple is then called to confess Christ before other people. And this isn't just about what you believe in your head, it's a public, out-loud declaration of your allegiance, even when it's dangerous. And the promise that comes with it is just as profound. Acknowledge him on earth, and he will acknowledge you before the Father in heaven. Okay, so we've talked about the internal mindset of the disciple. Now we're going to shift gears to the pretty harsh external reality they're going to face. And this is where we run into one of the most jarring statements in the entire New Testament. You know, we often hear Jesus called by his prophetic title, the Prince of Peace, right? So it's natural to think his whole mission was to bring universal harmony, to end all conflict, but is that what Jesus himself said about his purpose? And boom, here it is. This statement is a huge paradox. But the crucial thing to get here is that the sword he's talking about, it's not a sword of physical violence. Think of it more as a sort of division, the kind of division that truth itself creates. When light shines into a dark room, it immediately creates a sharp line. The gospel brings peace to the soul that accepts it, but it absolutely forces a confrontation with a world that wants to reject it. And he warns them, this division is going to cut right through the most sacred thing they have: family. For a first-century Jew, deciding to follow Jesus wasn't just a private religious choice. It could mean being cast out, disowned, treated like a traitor to your family, your community, your entire heritage. Jesus is laying it out in no uncertain terms. Your ultimate loyalty to the truth might put you at odds with the very people you love the most. So, okay, if following Christ can literally split your family apart, what does that mean for you personally? What is the actual cost of that loyalty? In these next few verses, Jesus outlines the radical, all-in demands he places on anyone who would even think about truly following him. He lays out 3 demands, and they are totally non-negotiable. First, your love for him has to come before anyone else, even your own parents or children. Second, a disciple has to take up his cross, which means willingly accepting the suffering that's going to come. And third, you have to lose your life, let go of your own ambitions, your instinct to protect yourself, in order to find what is real, true, eternal life. We have to stop for a second and really understand what take up the cross meant to the people hearing this for the first time. This was not some pretty poetic phrase. For anyone living under Roman rule, the cross was the symbol of the most brutal, humiliating, agonizing death imaginable. It was a sign of total defeat and public shame. So when Jesus tells his followers to take up their cross, he is telling them to be willing to face the absolute worst the world can throw at them, to endure anything, even death, for their commitment to him. All right, so after laying out this just overwhelming cost of what it means to follow him, Jesus completely shifts the tone. He moves from the cost to the reward. He explains his principle of divine reciprocity that isn't just for his disciples, but for everyone who supports them along the way. This next verse sets up a really powerful idea, the principle of divine representation. To welcome one of Christ's messengers isn't just a nice thing to do for that person. In God's economy, it is the exact same thing as welcoming Christ himself. And if you welcome Christ, you are welcoming God the Father who sent him. It's a direct, unbroken chain of spiritual authority and identity.
And this idea then branches out into a whole system of rewards. It's like this. If you welcome a prophet simply because he's a prophet, you get to share in the prophet's reward. If you welcome a righteous person, you share in their reward. And then, look how he brings it right down to the smallest possible act of kindness, giving one of his disciples just a cup of cold water. Even that simple gesture, he says, if it's done for a disciple, will not be missed, and it will not lose its reward.
And that leaves us with this really powerful final thought. After demanding everything, your family, your security, even your life itself, Jesus ends by confirming the immense value of the smallest act of kindness. It shows that in God's kingdom, the disciple who's willing to die on a cross and the person who simply offers them a cup of cold water, they are both seen, they are both valued, and they will both be rewarded.